everyone, welcome back to my channel. As you may or may not know, I recently went back to New York and I went on my own, and this is the biggest solo trip that I've ever done. So naturally a few people had some questions and I thought I may as well just ask for them to make a video and hopefully give you some decent answers. Quite a few questions were about like the traveling itself. So I had some questions, for example, from Emma about how do you get a good hotel price as a solo traveler, or did I use Airbnb? And as well, I can't remember who asked, I've not put it on my list, but someone asked who I flew with. So when it came to booking my trip, basically the main purpose of my trip was for Broadway Con, so that obviously solidified the dates that I was going. This is actually a question that Carrie has asked as well, so I might quickly answer that first. She's asked, I'd love to know of your experience booking tickets for Broadway Con with being an international visitor. I've wanted to go since it first began, but wouldn't even know where to start with planning. When I decided that I wanted to go to Broadway Con, obviously I kept tabs on when they were like selling the tickets, and I bought them the day that they went on sale. I was very keen. I didn't need to be so keen. I kind of thought it was going to sell out quite quickly, but it didn't. I didn't need to worry about buying them immediately. Being an international buyer, they didn't send my badge over to me. I just picked it up when I got there. So, I mean, it was really simple, if I'm honest. I had quite a bit of trouble with the payment. I think because I'd moved recently, and I'd put the billing address in wrong, I think, so it obviously just wasn't liking my card. I had to book it through my boyfriend's credit card, I think, but it worked fine. And obviously I was stressing as well, thinking, oh my god, they're all gonna sell out and I'm not gonna get them, but that wasn't the case. It's at the Javits Centre, so it's not like a small venue. They still had tickets available up until fairly soon before the event. So yeah, the whole booking process was really simple, and as I said, I picked my ticket, my badge up when I got to Broadway Con, so it really wasn't stressful. Yeah, that was like the easiest part of the trip. In terms of booking the trip, I think I booked my flights and hotel, ironically, just after I got back from the last New York trip, which was September. Obviously Broadway Con is in January, so I literally just kind of got back from it. So I booked October, November, December, January. So I booked it 4 months before going, which I guess is kind of late. Depends on how organised you want to be. I knew that I wanted to try and fly with British Airways because I've had really good experience flying with British Airways recently, so that was kind of a goal in mind. On my previous flights to New York, I've gone with Delta a long time ago, and when I went in 2015, I flew with Norwegian. The Norwegian experience was kind of horrible. We were delayed flying out for 2 hours, but we were already on the plane, so they wouldn't let us off. And it was something to do with, it was like a mechanical thing, so they were like fixing the plane while we were on it, which was really reassuring. So it was an extra 2 hours, and it meant we got to New York really late, so it just wasn't ideal at all. Whereas British Airways, I had a good experience when we flew with them in September of last year, so I knew that that was kind of the one I wanted to go with. In terms of the hotel, yes, it was pricey, obviously, because it was just me. Well, when I was looking anyway, there weren't many like cheaper options available. I have stayed in an Airbnb before in New York. When I went there in 2015, my friend and I stayed in an Airbnb in Union City, so it's technically New Jersey. When I was looking for this trip, the prices of the Airbnbs were pretty similar to what it would be to stay in a hotel, and I thought I'd much rather stay in a hotel if it's going to be the same price. I think for everyone it's going to be slightly different in that you'll need to shop around and see obviously what works best for you, but I've just stayed in hotels the last couple of times because, as I say, it's worked out to be fairly similar. And why would you pay to stay in someone's spare room if it's the same price as having your own hotel room? So on the 2017 trip, we stayed at the Amsterdam Court Hotel, which is right next to Wicked. Honestly, I didn't realise that we were right next door to Wicked. I thought we were like another block over. But no, we were right outside Wicked, and ironically I didn't even see it on that trip. But that's just a like 7-minute walk to Times Square. It was really, really close to the Broadway area. So that was really good because I was seeing a few shows without my boyfriend, so obviously it was nice to know that I could just walk back to the hotel. It wasn't far and it just felt a bit safer. On this trip, the Broadway Con trip, I stayed at the Doubletree by Hilton on Lexington Avenue. So this was a little bit further out. The hotels near Broadway were very pricey at this point when I was looking. This was kind of the closest, nicest one that I could find at a reasonable price. I think for my flights to and from New York, including the hotel, and I stayed from Wednesday through to Tuesday, I think it came to around the £800 mark, which obviously is not cheap, but when you're flying over to a city like this, when you're staying relatively central to like the main attractions, you can't expect it to be super cheap. Your best bet, honestly, if you can be flexible with the times that you can go, is to like look when flight deals are happening. So for example, with British Airways or with Virgin Atlantic, I booked the package through Expedia. So I think because we could get like some points or something for who knows what, some sort of points or cashback through booking with Expedia. I think that's why we did it. Anyway, I hope that kind of covers the whole flights and booking thing. Sadly, there's only so much advice I can give for you. Would definitely recommend checking out Skyscanner because they have a feature where you can search for like the cheapest month, so it'll tell you generally when the flights are cheaper. I would recommend flying with either British Airways. Do Virgin Atlantic fly to New York? Surely they must. I mean, I've had the best experience on British Airways, so I personally would fly with them. But obviously it's up to you how much you want to spend. Obviously the other airlines are cheaper, but there's a reason why they're cheaper. So in relation to that kind of main bulk of questions, Robert asks, how far in advance did you plan and book everything for New York? Where did you stay? Would you recommend going this time of year? And how long in an ideal world would you stay for? And he's apologised for a load of questions, but I said to him, don't apologise because it's good to have a lot of questions. So for the previous 2017 trip, I think we booked it in sort of springtime. So again, not with a huge amount of notice. I think probably around 6 months before we went. And then for the January trip, obviously I knew it was happening. I booked the Broadway Con tickets ages before, but everything was actually booked 4 months before. So not like with a huge amount of time to go. I think if you booked it further in advance, possibly some things might be cheaper, especially if there's like a flight sale going on or something, then yeah, that would probably make it a lot cheaper. Again, Emma's asked, how did you get to New York? Which airline? British Airways. And where did I stay? And then top tips for getting cheap tickets for Broadway shows. If you haven't already seen, I did put up a video probably a week ago when this one goes up. I'm not sure when I'm putting this video up, but I put it up recently. I'll link it in the description about how I bought the tickets for the shows that I saw in New York. I paid pretty much less than $100 per ticket for all of those shows. There was only one that I paid slightly over $100. So I talk you through all of that in the video and give you advice on like in general how to try and get cheaper tickets. So I'll link that video below. I'd recommend you just watch that because that's purely ticket focused. Tony is asking, when booking tickets in New York City, I always get confused by the seat categories, mezzanine, etc. A brief explanation and description would be useful. I'll do that in a second. Tony's also asked, are rush seats discounted tickets? I accept they're like day seats, just wondered if they are also discounted too. Yeah, I don't understand why we have different names for the levels in the theatres, but we have so stalls on the ground floor, and then dress circle, and then generally like upper circle and balcony, or it's stalls, royal circle, grand circle, balcony, for example. But generally it's always like stalls, balcony, and so on. And then in the US, it's orchestra being the ground floor. I'd presume the logic is that you're on the same level as the orchestra. I do not know. And then mezzanine. I think that's because that's a word they generally use for higher levels. So like for like, I don't know, like second floor, that's a mezzanine to them because it's the one up. And then, I mean, for the most of the Broadway theatres, they only really have 2 or 3 levels. From my experience anyway, that's what I've noticed. So they only really have orchestra, mezzanine, and then a balcony. Whereas in some of our theatres, we'd call it stalls, dress circle, upper circle. I'm not sure, I've not actually Googled why we have different names, but I will probably Google that after this video. In terms of the rush seats, yes, I think it is more a case of some seats that they have available that they are willing to discount at a cheaper price. Because, for example, when I was rushing / day seating at Waitress recently, they only had 9 seats available, and I mean 9 tickets. I didn't even check if they had seats and standing room or just the standing room seats. It does really vary show to show, and it's very different in comparison with how we have it in London, where for the most part you'll know that X show has X amount of seats. Like, for example, I've genuinely forgotten how many seats Wicked have. I think Wicked have like 24 seats. It's their entire front row, so you know going into it that that's how many seats they have available. Broadway, it's completely different in that respect. There's no kind of set guidelines, and something I mentioned in my tickets video is that most of the time their rush seats are partial view, so restricted view, whereas you don't really get that as much in London. Normally it's clear view seats. It's an actual good deal with the day seats in London, which is something that annoys me about Broadway, because I get it. I mean, just because you queue up in the morning to get a ticket, that doesn't mean you should get like the best seats in the house, but it's annoying that they're not a clear view. That is frustrating. So yes, I guess technically they are discounted at the rush price. I've had quite a few questions from people about like eating. So one from Simon is, I'm traveling to New York City on my own in October, hopefully. Just concerned about the eating situation. Did you feel awkward eating out on your own? Do you have any tips? I've also had a similar question from Jonathan. He's got a few questions, so I'll just focus on the fact, did you eat in restaurants alone? Yes, I did. And this is one that's really going to depend person to person, because I'm fairly confident. Even here in London, I don't care if I go to a restaurant on my own. I guess I'm just a bit ballsy like that, because I don't know, it doesn't really faze me. I don't feel stupid for going to a restaurant on my own. People have to eat. People go on holiday on their own, and you still have to eat. I have to say though, on this trip, I didn't eat healthily at all. It was quite a lot of cases of like fast food and things like that, because, so there's a couple of reasons. Not because I didn't want to sit in a restaurant on my own, but because of the way my plans worked out. I would either get up too late for a breakfast, and I didn't have breakfast included in my hotel as well, so it's not like I thought, oh well, if I get up early enough I can go down and have breakfast, which is included. So I'd get up kind of late-ish and have a late breakfast / lunch, or I'd get up, have a quick snack, and then just go out and then wait until lunch, which is not good. It's really not good, especially if you're doing a lot of touristy things and you're walking around the city a lot. That's not the way to fuel yourself, so I wouldn't recommend doing what I did. But yes, I didn't eat well, really. So like, for example, the first morning I was there, I managed to get like a breakfast muffin from Starbucks and had that in the rush queue for Waitress. Like, that was my breakfast. And then I'd have sort of really late dinners after shows, because I wouldn't have had time in between either Broadway Con and the shows to eat in between, so I'd just have a late dinner afterwards. Like, there was a Panda Express and a McDonald's near my hotel, so I just pick that up and take it back to my room. Like, I did not eat healthily, and that was not good. I had one meal with friends, which was really nice. We went to a place called Melt Shop. This is just off of Times Square, basically. I went with Jake and Kerry, and that was really nice because I'd been there before, actually. We discovered it on the last trip, so it was like, I know that's nice. It's kind of like a small meal. It's sort of like a toasty restaurant kind of place, so it's sort of fast foody. I guess I just recommend, if you're not massively comfortable with sitting in a full-on restaurant on your own. Just find a variety of the places that are sort of fast food like, but not completely like McDonald's or something like that. There was another meal that I had on my own that was an actual proper sit-down meal, because obviously a lot of the time as well, because I was on my own, I didn't want to spend a huge amount of time like wasting time in a restaurant. I was like, this is not the sole focus of my trip. I'm not going out here to taste like New York. I'm coming here for theatre. So as well, I didn't want to spend too much money on full restaurant meals. This is what I'm leading on to, because for my last day, I thought, oh, I've not really had a proper sit down meal. I'll treat myself and I'll go to Ellen's Stardust Diner. I've not been here since 2015, so I thought, let's see if it's changed, which it has, and, you know, actually have a full meal. I had a main course and I had a dessert and I had one fizzy drink and tap water, and that came to like $40 something, including the tip. So that's another reason why I didn't want to eat at a restaurant every day, because it could have easily come to like $40 every day, 40 or more depending on the restaurant. I'm also not a huge fan of the tipping culture out in America, and I know this sounds really bad, but I feel like some places that, especially on the last trip that we went to, and we didn't receive like the best service, but you feel so pressured to tip out in America, so I don't love that. So yeah, it will really depend, but I feel like especially if you do go to the places that are more fast food-esque, no one's gonna judge you, and you look around, you're gonna see so many people that are sat there on their own. I don't judge anyone for going out to eat on their own, because you've got to eat, especially if you're traveling. It's not like you've got a kitchen that you can go and make a meal. What are you meant to do? You're meant to starve? Like, honestly, you will be the only one that is worried about you being there on your own. Like, no one else is gonna judge you, I promise. Like, that's not gonna happen. Also, there's no shame on like being on your phone while you're in a restaurant. Like, if you're able to connect to the internet, or if you have internet, watch some YouTube videos, watch some Netflix. Like, you can entertain yourself. You don't just have to sit there staring like around you. You can do stuff. Like, there's no like, I don't know, I just think I'm a very confident person, so it never even crosses my mind of like how I look if I'm just on my own somewhere. But yeah, there's no shame in doing that, unless you are somewhere like Ellen's Stardust Diner. Don't be rude, like be on your phone all the time while someone's performing. I think that's another reason why I kind of picked Ellen's Stardust Diner as well, because it's a very different atmosphere to a normal restaurant. Obviously, you've got people singing in front of you. So I think that's, especially if you're a theatre person watching me and you have these concerns, I think that's a good restaurant to go to, because yeah, you've got something going on in front of you. Maybe I'm a bit weird for not feeling weird about it. It's not a concern for me. And I think you just have to be a little bit confident about it. No one's going to judge you. So another question Jonathan asked was, how do you fill time on your own, and did you feel lonely? If it's your first time going to New York, oh my gosh, there is so much to see and so much to do. I honestly don't think that you could have trouble filling your time if you wrote down like all the stuff that you could do in New York. You would never have a spare second. Like, I felt like I didn't have a spare second, and I've seen all the touristy stuff. So I mean, obviously I did have Broadway Con, so that took up 3 days of my trip. And then I was a bit like exhausted for the other days. But honestly, just write a list of everything you want to see. And once you factor in shows as well, which if you are a viewer of mine, you no doubt will be, honestly, the time goes so quickly. You know, I honestly thought I might feel a bit lonely on this trip, especially considering that it was the biggest trip away that I've done on my own. I was a bit concerned, but thankfully I didn't. I was so busy the whole time, and also I was very lucky in that I was able to meet up with friends. And then while at Broadway Con, I was just chatting away to people, like people at the marketplace stands, and then I was in like panels and things like that. So I think I'm just quite lucky in that I am a fairly confident person and I will talk to people. For example, I went to the Chelsea market to buy a print, and it was a stand that we'd been to on the last trip. So I knew exactly where I wanted to go, and I ended up chatting to the girl who was there Turns out that she's actually British, so that was really nice. And you know, we were just chatting for maybe 10 or so minutes. I just found myself having these little conversations with so many people. Like, for example, in the queue for waitress tickets, I ended up chatting to 4 of the people around me, and that made the time pass so quickly. When I eventually saw a waitress, I said hello to the girl that was sat next to me because she was also on her own. And then it turns out that she works for Todaytix over there. So I was like, it's like we were meant to talk to each other. And she'd seen Waitress before. She loved it. So we got chatting before the show and in the interval. And I don't know, I think I am just a very kind of open person in that way. Sometimes it's a curse because I end up chatting to people for far too long. But I'm very open to talking to people. But also it's fine if you're not. I don't think you need to do that. Sometimes it's just nice to chat to people, obviously. And I think as much as it's bad to be on your phone constantly throughout a trip, obviously you'll have friends at home that you can talk to, and there's no shame in being on your phone and messaging them and, you know, just keeping in contact to have that connection still. But I think it's kind of hard because I haven't really suffered in terms of that social interaction and feeling like I can't talk to people because obviously I make videos. I'm fairly confident in that respect. Like, I just talk to people. Sorry, I feel like that advice is really crap because it comes kind of naturally to me. But especially if you're in the theatre, like if you're going to New York and you're going to shows on your own and someone is next to you and you can kind of tell that they're on their own, or even like if they're not, if I don't know, if you feel confident enough to like say hello, or, and you know, the way I talked to that girl at Waitress is because she was at the end of the row and I obviously had to ask to move past her, and that's how I ended up, I think I had loads of bags, so I was like, do you mind if I put my bags at the end of the aisle? And then we just started chatting. I don't even know how we started chatting, to be honest. But yeah, no, I didn't feel alone, and I'm glad. Another question of Jonathan's, which I think is really good, is did I feel scared at all? I'm still quite young. I'm 23 years old, and obviously I'm a woman traveling on my own. I felt scared on the first night. Like after like my first full day. So I'd been to see Dear Evan Hansen, and then I think I walked home. No, it must have been actually the first night when I saw Wicked and I walked back to the hotel. Lord knows why. It was like a 15-minute walk back to my hotel. I think I just figured it would help tire me out because weirdly I was still quite awake. I'd seen, I think when I got to the hotel initially and I put the TV on in the background, a lot of it was just news channels, and it was like talking about someone that had been shot on the subway. So I think I was like, Americans have guns. So I was a little bit paranoid in that respect. But I'm kind of shocked at how unafraid I was throughout most of the trip. Obviously, sometimes walking back on my own, I was a tiny bit scared. And you know, you get some guys approach you if you're a woman, like some guys being sleazy. But again, I've become really good at putting up a front and being like, I'm just ignoring you and walking past, or no, I will not buy your crappy CD, or no, you cannot have my phone number. You know, I've become quite used to that living in London, sadly. There are a couple of tiny moments where I'd hear a taxi or whatever go over a manhole cover and it would make quite a loud noise, and like it could be a gunshot because you're in America and people can own guns. So there were a couple of moments where I freaked out momentarily, but I wasn't terrified, thankfully. I think obviously you just have to be really aware of the situations that you're putting yourself in. If you are going to New York or any city on your own and you're scared, put aside some money so you know that you can get an Uber from the theatre to your hotel or wherever you are to your hotel, and then you don't need to worry about walking or taking the subway if it bothers you that much. There are always little ways that you can keep yourself, you know, like with peace of mind and feeling a bit safer. Like there were some times that I took an Uber, mostly because I was running late to things. But you know, there were some times where I thought I'm gonna take an Uber because I don't feel comfortable right now. 99% of the time, you can take yourself out of that uncomfortable situation. Another Jonathan has asked, What's the best way to keep costs down on a solo trip to New York? This is a really hard question because it really depends on what you want to do, what you want to see, like if it's your first time to New York or if it's your 5th time to New York. Because for example, the first trip that I took with my friend, like when we were proper adults to New York, we bought like a city pass to obviously do the sights and stuff. We ate in restaurants and, you know, we did quite a lot of expensive things. It's the same when Leo and I went over last year. I think naturally when you're with someone else, I think you end up spending more because you will do slightly pricier things without even realizing it. For example, like not going to proper restaurants, like really, like not even fancy places, but just proper restaurants. I think that saved me money. Like, so this is weird, like I took Leo's credit card out with me because we wanted to get some like points and stuff on it, which is probably not like correct, but oh well. He said to me the other day, okay, you spent this much, so can you send it over to me? And I was like, whoa, I expected to have spent way more, like all things considered. So I think having done all the touristy things, like I would have liked to have done the Top of the Rock again, but I've done it on my last 2 trips. So, you know, I didn't need to do that. The only touristy things I did was I went to the Flatiron Building area, but that was just a subway trip. I went over to New Jersey to Hamilton Park where the Hamilton Bird Duel happened. That cost a tiny bit more because I couldn't use my Metro card. By the way, in terms of travel, if you're there for like a week, get the weekly Metro card because it's only like $32, which is quite a bargain when you think about it. And yeah, just do that, it'll be easier. So I didn't do really anything touristy on this trip. I walked a lot. I walked quite a lot actually, but there's a lot of free stuff that you can do in New York. So I feel like if you're okay with not fine dining every night, and if you're a bit savvier with your Broadway tickets, if that's why you're going, again, I'm presuming those who are watching this are probably those kind of people, I think you can kind of keep the costs down more than you'd expect them to be, if that makes sense. And as well, in terms of like buying merchandise and things like that, just kind of really think it through. Like, do you need that piece of merchandise or do you just want it? Like, I mean, I can't talk. I've spent too much money on Broadway merchandise in the last year, but that's beside the point. I also think, not to be like an enabler, but with trips like this, you shouldn't limit yourself too much, you know? If there are some places that you've always wanted to go and eat or you've always wanted to go and see, then you should do it. As I mentioned, the city pass, I'll link it down in the description. It's like you get a little booklet of things like attractions that you can go to. Like you can pick the different attractions and you do get quite a good discount on it. So I'd highly recommend doing that. I think it's called the New York City Pass or something like that. And also to do like the hop on, hop off buses. Yeah, there's loads of different things that you can do to keep things as cheap as they can be in an expensive city. Another question from Robert that I don't think I answered was, would you recommend going this time of year and how long in an ideal world would you want to stay for? I've only ever stayed in New York for like a week and I would love more time. Because especially on this last trip where I had Broadway Con as well, so I had like 3 days where I wasn't doing anything else in the day apart from Broadway Con. It would be lovely to go to New York and maybe go for like, in an ideal world, maybe like 2 weeks. So I could do a lot more shows, first of all, but also kind of mooch around the city in a bit more of a local fashion. There are quite a few areas of New York that I've not been able to visit because they're quite a distance to go, and like you'd need like a full day to do it. So like the last trip, Leo and I went out to Brooklyn for the day and that was really nice to be able to just kind of take it slow and have a nosy round. I'd love to do that. So if I could afford it, 2 weeks would be amazing. More even, but like 2 weeks as a holiday would be fantastic. But also when I fly over to the States, I've got family over there, so it's always nice to try and fit them in as well, to try and like see them, because obviously they live so far away. So yeah, 2 weeks for New York would be the dream, but I'd feel guilty flying over to the States for 2 weeks and not seeing my family. And also there are so many other places in America that I want to see, so yes. And also in terms of going this time of year, things are a little bit cheaper, I think. And as I mentioned in my Broadway tickets video, there's a promotion, Broadway week 2-for-1 tickets. So that's a good kind of reason to go over at that time of year. But they do also have this offer in September. Weather-wise, I mean, the last 2 times I've gone to New York when it's been September, it's been boiling hot, like heat wave hot. And obviously this time in January, it was way colder. When I went to New York in 2011, it was also the start of January. The start of January, way colder. I mean, I don't know if global warming has contributed to this, but oh my goodness. It was freezing that first time that we went to New York when I was like a teenager. The weather was really odd. One day it was so cold. The next day it would be like mild, borderline warm, and the next day it's so cold it's snowing. So I think it's really temperamental. I think the ideal time to go to New York would be either spring or autumn, because I think then you've got sort of a healthy temperature, like a healthy balance of temperature. And when I say autumn, I mean like October time, because yeah, September has been just a heat wave. So yeah, I'd love to go to New York in the spring one time, but obviously it's too close to go this year, so not that I haven't been tempted. My God, I can't, I really can't. Well, I think that's everything for this New York Q&A, going to New York solo. I hope it's helped you. If you have any more questions that you want to ask me, please do just let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them, because I feel like I answered a lot of the same questions. I don't know. I don't know how helpful this video was. I hope it was helpful. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of Broadway and New York related videos up on my channel, like in this time period. So make sure you go and check those out, especially if you want to know what I thought of the 6 Broadway shows that I got to see in my week out there. Hence why I'm exhausted. No, I had a fantastic time though, and I do not regret it. If you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I hope you're all doing really well, and I will see you very soon. Bye!